Remember from previous lessons that Britain had sent soldiers to protect its officials in Boston. The people of Boston did not want British soldiers in their city. Frustrated colonists often fought with the soldiers. On March 5, 1770, a fight began when a crowd of people in Boston argued with a British soldier. The crowd yelled insults and threw snowballs. More soldiers arrived, and suddenly one of them fired a shot. Then several other soldiers fired their guns. 5 colonists were killed. Afterward, angry colonists called the fight a massacre. A massacre is the killing of many people. One of the colonists that was killed was Crispus Attucks, an African-American sailor who is remembered today as a hero. Paul Revere, a son of liberty and a Boston silversmith, created a picture of the Boston Massacre. It showed British soldiers shooting at colonists who are peaceful, not angry. The Sons of Liberty used the picture to convince colonists that the British soldiers were dangerous. The soldiers of the Boston Massacre were put on trial. John Adams, an important Boston lawyer, defended the soldiers at their trial. John Adams wanted to show Britain that colonial courts were fair. Adams tried to prove that the soldiers had been protecting themselves from the crowd. 6 soldiers were found innocent and 2 were lightly punished. At the time of the Boston Massacre, news traveled slowly. Samuel Adams wanted more colonists to know what was happening around the colonies. In 1772, Adams and the other colonial leaders in Boston set up committees of correspondence to share news with the other colonies. Correspondence is written communication. Soon, every colony had committees of correspondence. They sent each other letters about what the British were doing and what actions colonists could take. In 1773, Parliament passed the Tea Act. This law allowed the East India Company of Britain to sell tea in America at a very low price. For years, merchants had avoided paying taxes by smuggling tea into the colonies from other countries. The Tea Act made taxed tea from Britain even cheaper than smuggled tea. So now the tea coming in from the East India Company was the cheapest tea in the colonies. If the colonists bought the inexpensive tea, they would still be paying a British tax at the same time. The colonists did not believe that Parliament should tax them without their agreement. They also did not want only one company to control the tea trade. So even though the tea was less expensive, they were still mad they had to pay a tax to Britain without any representation in Parliament. Boston merchants would not sell the East India tea. It sat unloaded on the ships in Boston Harbor. British officials refused to let the tea go back to Britain. Colonists decided they needed to get rid of the tea that was in Boston Harbor. On the night of December 16, 1773, several dozen Sons of Liberties boarded the ships illegally, dressed as Native Americans. They threw the tea into the harbor. This event is known as the Boston Tea Party. Parliament passed laws called the Coercive Acts to punish colonists in Massachusetts. To coerce means to force. The colonists called these laws the Intolerable Acts. Intolerable means unbearable. The laws stopped trade between Boston and Britain, ended most town meetings, and gave Britain more control over the colony's government. British soldiers returned to Boston, and the colonists had to quarter the soldiers. To quarter people is to give them food and shelter. Committees of correspondence spread news of the Intolerable Acts. People thought the colonies were furious with Britain. They felt the laws were too harsh. Colonists agreed to hold a meeting to discuss the Intolerable Acts. They sent delegates to meet in Philadelphia. A delegate is someone chosen to speak and act for others. On September 5, 1774, delegates from every colony except Georgia met. The meeting became known as the First Continental Congress. The Congress wrote a letter to the British government and the American colonists. The letter said that the colonies should have the same freedom as other British citizens. It asked King George III and Parliament to stop taxing colonists without their agreement and to repeal the Intolerable Acts. The delegates decided to meet again in May if the king refused their demands. In the meantime, the colonists stopped trade with Britain. They began to train for battle in case war with Britain broke out. The king made plans to send more soldiers to Boston. He declared that the colonists had begun a rebellion.